I think the basic reason for making movies is impatience, because there were certain things I wanted to see happen, and it's fastest if you do it yourself in many things in life. And so in 2000, I got together with some friends and we decided to make a movie on digital video, which the technology had been available for some time, but no one had done it before in the country. So I think, yeah, impatience, I guess. Not to say that it was always a dream, but if other people were making the kind of movies I want to see, then maybe I would not have done it. Yeah. It's a happy coincidence that the format came at the right time, because I would not have been able to afford even like Betacam, which is what TV movies at that time were shooting with. And so yeah, because maybe if the technology had been there, I would have done something else. Because in Malaysia, I don't know about other countries as such, but in Malaysia in particular, we don't really have a tradition of people making movies independently. The idea that if you want to go into feature films, you start off by making TV shows, and then you graduate to TV programs, and then you graduate to TV movies, and then so like that. So I did not happen to go through that path. So I bungled around and did my own thing.
Awak dia lagu tu. Kenapa rakyat Malaysia gentar sangat masa tu? Dan apakah susulannya? Tunggu dulu, kita perlukan shot permulaan. Ini shot permulaan yang sesuai. Hampir semua filem Malaysia bermula macam ni. Inilah KL zaman sekarang. Inilah bangunan tertinggi di dunia, Menara Kembar Petronas. Yang ni Menara 1, yang ni Menara 2. Atau mungkin sebaliknya. Tapi cerita kita pada tahun 87. Menara Kembar Petronas tak wujud lagi. Kita boleh pilih shot ini sebagai permulaan.
That was in the Big Durian in particular, and when I made that, I quite consciously had a kind of college age audience in mind, a Malaysian college age. So I mean, it never occurred to me that years later it will be shown halfway around the world. And I think in our education system, we are used to being told things to memorize. This is it, and make sure you know it, because in the exam they will ask this, and there's quite a big industry in Malaysia, for people to guess what the exam question is. The best-selling books in Malaysia are these prediction. So it's how our lives are run, because you need to buy books of predicted questions and really hope that really comes out, because your exam results will make such a difference. So I suppose it's more like a playful way of referring to that, like, oh, this is important. But at the same time, the narrator says, oh, actually, I'm not so sure either. So it's just that. It's like a joke.
It's a strange irony, you have to do literal.
Yeah. When I went to film classes, it wasn't really film school, and I think it was doing this, and somebody asked the lecturer, how do you make a perfect film? And then he answered something quite profound. Maybe I'll quote it somewhere. He says, oh, it's very easy to make a perfect film. Just become a perfect human being and make a film. Because if you're a perfect human being, anything you do will be perfect. So rather than worry so much about the fact that you're not perfect, might as well just celebrate and make use of whatever interesting imperfections you have. So I think that's essentially what it is. I mean, like that other quote, I'm quoting everywhere, from Douglas Adams, if you want to fly, you have to, it's not difficult to fly, you just fall down and miss, right? So the falling down has to happen first. So and you shouldn't be so scared. I think it started off with Big Durian where, like I said, the primary audience in mind was a young college audience. So we're talking about 19, 20-year-olds. And I was imagining myself in their age. I would not want to watch a documentary. I would certainly not, like if you drag me and force me to sit down, then I would, but I wouldn't say, oh, I can't wait to watch this documentary. So that's why I wanted to use actors. And the actors I use, many of them are quite well known from TV and from commercials. So when their faces come on, and yet the name is something else, so that creates a kind of intriguing thing like, I know who this is. I've seen her on TV hosting a show, but here she is pretending. So I think just to create that extra level of interest, actually, it's not to make it like a complex stylistically, but it's a kind of populist mechanism, as it were. And to me, it's interesting as well because what is an interview? Is it meant to be taken literally that what they say is true or what they remember is true? In a case like Big Durian, no, because the whole idea is that people's memories are faulty. People exaggerate certain things and people choose not to highlight certain things, which is how rumors spread.
我開腳車部係3年前咯，自己興趣啦，最緊要自己有興趣咯。So 好似以前一路嚟都係踩腳車會健康啲。我哋人望係咪唔會向後望？以前踩腳車人比較長命啲，所以依家都冇得坐摩托幣，So 佢哋會講去再踩腳車咯。So 我本人認為啦，腳車就帶嚟健康咯。And then 摩多方面啦，係俾我哋方便咯。有時講近短路係咪？摩多係俾我哋方便啫。
Last communist to me is just fun because if I were to just go to those towns and say, what do you think about communism? Or I wouldn't get any response at all. You get the most stone-faced kid, which I tried. The first time I did it, I tried to raise the subject of Chimping, because that was his town where he was born, and nobody wanted to talk about it. It's like, they were quite suspicious. So the easiest way to get somebody to be animated and interesting, I think, is to get them to talk about their job, because people are proud of their job. People, especially the kind of job where they have to meet people and all that. So it came quite naturally. So after a while, that seemed more interesting than, what do you think about communism? So I wanted to hear more and more about, how do you sell this fruit?
Okay, yeah.
It is nothing about where he stays, how he was brought up and all that. Because most people don't well know, people like me.
Right.
Okay, and I think I'm surprised public pressure has resulted in the government banning it. In reality, I think it's a third-class comedy.
Third-class comedy.
Third-class comedy.
You didn't like it then?
Not only I don't like it, I'm surprised the decision was ever made by the people in authority.
Did you think it was boring? No.
More than boring.
More than boring.
People who live under certain systems develop certain types of humor. The famous examples would be things like Gogol or Kundera. If you live under kind of a totalitarian things, then the humor becomes about codes. You have to speak in codes and about the absurdity of bureaucracy and that kind of thing. But I guess we in Malaysia don't really have that kind of totalitarian thing. But perhaps we have many rules. There's the religious rules as well, and there's the propaganda. We're fed a lot of propaganda. It's not as like blanket as like Pravda or whatever, but the government always wants to tell us things and tell us how to do things. So maybe that's why we respond in a certain way. I don't know. Well, maybe it existed even before we had government. We are fun-loving people, so I don't know. It's very hard work to deconstruct humor, right? I mean, you can just tell whether something's funny or not. I just assume if somebody makes an entirely serious film with no jokes, I assume that they force themselves to do it that way. They really, really force themselves. They force themselves to take out things. Because I think anything in its present form, if you take it as present, it must have humor. It must. As long as they're human beings, as long as they are systems.
Dengan kejayaan Lenin di Rusia, kita menghapuskan fasisme. Perubahan melanda benua Cina, revolusi sosialisme. Berjuanglah kaum pekerja, kitalah harapan semua. Kapitalisme musuh utama, harta patut dikongsi semua. Berkibar-kibar bendera merah, gemilang komunisme.
Well, he is very serious. Everybody's very serious about documentary, which is good, but also which I think, I feel like a bit of a fraud because I'm not that serious about documentary either, so I don't think about documentary so much. I don't think of it as documentary even. I just think of it as, this is a direct way. It's an interesting, fun way of doing this, that's all. So I'm not so faithful to that. But the one about reaction, I think it's like another quote, the Korostami quote, if you go into a supermarket, what you take out of it depends on the size of your basket. People get out of it what they want. Like the big durian at the Flaherty seminar, of all places, there was somebody who insisted, and she was very insistent, that the reference in Big Durian to the Twin Towers, that was actually a reference to the New York Twin Towers. And I said, no, it wasn't. Then she said, no, but on some subconscious level, you must have been talking about those Twin Towers. And I said, no, it didn't cross my mind. So I posed to her, when you mention Twin Towers anywhere around the world, you have to talk about New York, because maybe that is the only reality she knows, and she thinks that's the center of the universe. So I think that's quite telling, that's quite interesting. I think everybody is represented, but the representation often takes this kind of grandstanding, this kind of, this party will say, I will standing my ground, we cannot compromise on this, and it has resulted in, race consciousness in places where they shouldn't be. The slightest conflict, somebody can have a racial angle. Because recently, ridiculously enough, on YouTube, there was a video of an employee of, do you have Kentucky Fried Chicken here? This employee of Kentucky Fried Chicken punching a customer. So it became this, I think over 1 million people have seen it. So of course this is like bad customer service. And it should just be seen as bad customer service. But it quickly took on a racial angle, because the one doing the punching and the one being punched happened to be of different ethnicity. So it's an example of how something which should not be racial ends up being racial. So in Malaysia, we like to keep reminding ourselves that we're so multicultural and all that. But other countries are multicultural as well. Like Brazil is much more multicultural, and without these kind of politics, I think, to make things more tense when they should be not be tense. Yeah. It's human that if you're told this is something you cannot discuss, that becomes interesting because first of all, what is it? And second is, why can't we discuss it? So to me, that's where stories are. Stories aren't about, oh, this is what we want you to discuss, but it's what we don't want you to, because that's often more interesting in any society. So just in Malaysia, we have certain taboos, certain historical taboos, religious taboos, and political taboos. And we are told that we are such a delicate society that if certain discussion is allowed, then everything will break loose. But we've seen that that's not the case. So I guess that's what I mean by absence, because it is something that has been forced to exist outside of the realm of the permissible. Then that is actually interesting. The fact that it's missing is interesting. So that's why for Last Communists, I exaggerated it to a degree that you never even see Jinping's face.
There is no way to bring about peace other than to offer suitable terms for the surrender of the Communist Party, against whom the government is fighting today. Communism is like a disease sucking out the blood of Malaya and will cause the ruin of the country. To be just anti-British does not suffice to indicate that one is loyal to Malaya.
我们还是相信我们的意识行动，绝不允许他人强迫我们放弃我们的意识行动。如果可以的话，我们希望呈现我们的意识行动，给人民来选择。
There is room in this country. There is wealth, there is riches, there is everything.
Even in the newspaper, when they're discussing, they will have the courtesy of printing his face. But you don't see him like talking. You don't hear his voice and all that. So I chose to exaggerate it like totally there's just this blank thing. But even then it was considered like a tribute. So how can you pay tribute to somebody without even showing? So interesting. It must be boring to live in a country where there are no taboos.